Hello! You are watching Chapter 34 of my TearRing Saga Champions of Usna low turn count playthrough. We've gotten pretty used to having short maps with all the warp skips we've been doing recently on Holmes's route, and this big massive map is a harsh return to reality. Although even compared to my previous videos, this one is just massive. And there are a couple of reasons for this, most significantly that this map takes a lot of turns. And the annoying thing about that is that I simply can't reduce the turn count at all, because we are once again waiting for a recruitable unit who shows up fashionably late. Beyond that though, there are some narrative reasons for why this map is so big and long in the first place. And we also have quite an extensive preparation segment coming up. So let's elaborate on the story just a little bit. According to the plot, in this map we are finally facing for the first time the full force of the Canaanite military, because they no longer have scapegoats to hide behind. The army led by Senate and Tia that we've encountered before is currently in the process of invading Canaan and liberating it from the cult of Gerxel, and because of that, the imperial princes Barker and Julius have decided that they need to stall Runan for as long as possible in order to prevent him from attacking Canaan while this is ongoing. It's really kind of tragic, because Barker and Julius seem to be unaware that Runan and Senate have already been in communication with each other. And the reason that Runan is advancing is because he refuses to leave the capital of Reeve in enemy hands any longer. Because of this, the game designers did their best to pull out all the stops in terms of difficulty for this map and the next one. And that's part of the reason why each turn of this map is going to take quite a while on its own. On the subject of this map's difficulty, this is widely considered to be one of the most difficult maps in the game, and from a casual player's perspective, I can see it. There are some very scary enemies on this map, such as a large cluster of Chukonu artillerymen, in addition to infinite reinforcements, both of which make turtling on this map a very poor strategy for making progress. The design really does encourage you to go as fast as you possibly can if you want to win. On the other hand, in an incomplete recruitment LTC, you still have to deal with those scary enemies, while also going at completely breakneck pace, because it is possible to clear this map in only 1 or 2 turns in that context. So that's also really challenging. In contrast, in this run, because we are waiting around for the recruitable unit, this map is one of the easiest clears in the entire game. Because of all the preparation my army has had, on account of this being an LTC run, I'm going to have a pretty easy time exploiting the weak points of this map, because I know exactly how to change this map from being an intimidating and threatening one into something that's comparatively a stroll in the park. I feel like this map is a really good example of how different playstyles have different challenge points. Anyway, that's enough rambling. My preparations are nearly complete, so let's quickly talk about some things that happened. Firstly, before we even started the map, I went shopping, because some of my units are running low on pylum uses, and Runan needed to get another rapier, which he's going to use several times during this map. Raphael loaded up on all of the stat boosters that are earmarked for him, and then one possibly surprising thing is that I pulled out an Elfire tome and gave it to Narcus. Which is odd because he is obviously a sword user. But the reason for this is that this is the map where we start making use of Narcus's personal skill, Imitate, and he is going to be transforming into a tome user for this map. The specific one we're going with is Sierra, because she, as a witch, has the warp skill as a class skill. And since Imitate copies class skills, that means that Narcus is going to be able to warp around the map and do whatever I want him to do. I believe that this is by far the best use of the Imitate skill, and is the only use of said skill that I'm going to be doing for this entire run. My turn 1 strategy is devoted to neutralizing the most dangerous parts of this map as quickly as possible. In particular, we want to block off the Wyvern Knight reinforcements ASAP, because flying enemies are a real pain to deal with. And we also want to get rid of the Ballistae in the middle of the map, because they threaten fragile units like Lyria. And then there is the aforementioned mob of artillerymen near the center. These guys all have Chukonus, as well as extremely high defense, and we want Raphael to kill as many of them as possible for experience. Unfortunately, even with the Empower boost, he is not able to one-round KO them with 1 to 2 range, and so he is going to be relying on taking damage to activate his Wrath skill, so that he can kill them off with critical hits instead. Raffin is going to be the one who handles the Wyvern Knight reinforcements. He's going to use the Brave Lance in order to one-round KO, and then move up to block any more Wyvern Knights from spawning for the rest of the map. Lee is then going to be pulling out the second use of Himern, which is going to be going to Vega's Broken Shram. Obviously, Shram is an amazing weapon, and using Himern here means that Vega is going to continue to be useful to us for the remainder of the game, rather than falling into obscurity. After all, there are still plenty of monsters for him to kill with that thing. Narcus is going to imitate Sierra after that. He obviously needs to do this now, before Sierra warps off to do other things. In this case, immediately heading up to start killing off the Ballistae on this central hill. Sierra obviously isn't going to be able to kill all of these Ballistae in this turn, and that means that Raffin looks like he's in a slightly worrying position, but I gave him the Goddess Shield in the preparations so that he would be immune to effective damage, and that means that these ballisticians are actually going to decide to target other units over him. Plus we have Rishal moving in and showing off the power of Meteor in order to eliminate the second of the 3 ballisticians. So that one ballistician that's left really isn't a threat to anyone, and this expands where our more fragile units are able to stand considerably. Taking this kill gets Rishal slightly closer to level 10 and his promotion, which he really should have by now, but I've been slack. Neron is going to be using the Occult book here in order to break his previous level cap of 30, so he can finally start gaining levels and thus a bit more strength again from here on in. And meanwhile, the other units are just arranging themselves in order to support Raphael next turn. Raphael is going to be fighting as many of these artillerymen as can reach him on this enemy phase. And there is an enemy bishop on this map who is going to be healing the one who Raphael weakened on the player phase. This guy is going to be a bit of a thorn in my side during this map, but luckily here he does not quite heal enough to prevent Raphael from cleanly one-round KOing the artilleryman when he attacks on this enemy phase. The trouble with Chukonu, as far as Raphael is concerned here, is that they're quite inaccurate, and that means that I actually have a really hard time getting hit enough to power up his Wrath skill, and that leaves quite a few of the artillerymen alive at the end of this enemy phase. But to be honest, I'd sooner have an enemy phase where I take less damage than I want than what happens on turn 2, but we'll get to that. A common strategy for more casual players here is to have Rishal fight these Chukonu instead, using the Sunflame tome. because the enemy AI doesn't seem to take into account Sunflame's +10 protection when deciding who to target, so Richelieu is often targeted even when he takes little to no damage. And because he hits on enemy resilience, he's really good at killing these guys because they have basically none of that. So that's something to keep in mind if you're having trouble with this map. Sierra is now moving in to kill the last ballista in the central hill, and that means that our fragile units are now completely free to move around in that area, which is going to be quite helpful for Lyria. Raphael's enemy phase did leave several of the artillerymen at low health, but thankfully there is only one bishop on this map, so only one of them can be healed per turn. And also, because the bishop goes first, any units who get damaged during the enemy phase will not be healed by him during the same enemy phase, so they can be easily picked off afterwards. Moving on, we'll have a look at what Mariel is doing. I've pretty much given up hope of her reaching promotion level at this point, but she is going to be grinding on the reinforcements that spawn in this lower right point to get as much magic as she can. Thanks to the ensorcel staff, she is able to one-hit KO them with pretty much perfect accuracy. We'll notice her Aura Rain tome lighting up a bit later in the map, but it's not going to be used here for a couple of reasons, which I'll get into later. The focus for the first half of this map, other than opening the way to the seize point, is to block off as many of these reinforcement points as possible. We have a couple of units that are really good at this, specifically our warp units who can warp over to land on any fort anywhere on the map, and also our Canto units, particularly Raffin, who can kill a reinforcement spawn and then Canto onto the point. Narcus in particular, I don't mind putting on a reinforcement point and then just leaving him there for the entire map, because he is not going to be making very many combat contributions otherwise. Sierra and Raffin need to do some more combat though, so they're mostly temporary blockers until my foot units can get over to take over those duties. As usual, I am having Lyria practice her singing at every possible opportunity, and on this map, she does not need to refresh anyone at all on account of how many turns we have to take. But every time she does refresh someone, that helps us progress in the map a bit more quickly. So Lyria's singing is once again adding reliability to my clear, despite how low percent the activation rate is. I would now like to draw your attention to the enemy unit walking along the top of the map. This is Stephanie, who is the daughter of Prince Barker, and she is really mad at us because we killed her uncle Barbarossa back in Chapter 18. So her intention in this map is to rush towards Runan in an attempt to kill him in revenge. And we do not want that to happen, obviously, but what we can do about this is Runan can talk to her, and he will easily overpower her and take her captive. And if we do this on this map, we get a special reward in a later map. So we're going to be careful about where we put our units in relation to Stephanie, and we're going to try and have Runan talk to her later on. Incidentally, she is one of the reasons why we're not using Aura Rain, because we're not going to have talked to her by turn 5, and she takes a huge chunk of damage from Mariel. Raphael has had a pretty rough enemy phase here. You see that he's already on low health, and he has to stick a couple of dodges in order to survive. On the other hand, this does mean that his Wrath is at nearly full power, so most of these Chukonu artillerymen have been killed off, which is a good thing because they're scary and we need to start moving towards the seize point now. Mintz is showing off how useful his Flurry skill is once again, and there's a slight discrepancy in damage here, where he's able to do 1 damage after a certain number of attacks, and that's because all of these artillerymen are carrying leather shields. So once he gets enough hits in on them, he breaks through the shields and starts doing damage without needing a critical hit there. He is obviously relying on critical hits to get through these guys, but Flurry gives him enough chances that it's fairly reliable for him to get the kills. So on this player phase, I'm having a bit of trouble working out how to deal with all of the threatening enemies in this little right-hand area. I want to block off the bow rider reinforcements so that they can't threaten my squishy units at 2 range, which Naron is helping to do, but he doesn't have enough movement to canto on and block. So that's going to be Raphael's job after he makes use of the hammer to kill the enemy ballistician. But I don't really have enough good combat units left after that to deal with the brave crossbow bow rider who's already here and the Chukonu artilleryman. So we need to have Sierra warp over to help us deal with that. And that strategy does mean that the Mage Knight is going to be left alive to harass us, but fortunately the Mage Knight is not scary enough to really threaten the deaths of any of our units. So that's okay. It's actually something of a theme on this map that my inputs and strategies are a little bit messy and not well practiced. And that's because I did this map in pretty much a single take without needing to reset. And so I'm basically just improvising my way through because I've only had one practice run on this map and I didn't particularly focus on getting specific strategies down pat. And one kind of annoying expression of this is that I do not have Raphael use any of the stat boosters that I have given him on this map, even though I have multiple opportunities to do so. This is particularly galling in light of what happens later on in the map, because having those stat boosters on him would have increased his reliability against the boss. So it really would have been a lot better if I had remembered to put those stat boosters on Raphael during this map. But it's in the past, and we're going to put those stat boosters on Raphael later on anyway. Anyway, moving on from that. There are now quite a few Mage Knights swarming around the upper left of where our units are, because I've left the reinforcements to spawn without killing them for a couple of turns. So we are going to have to deal with that pretty soon. Another expression of my messy strategies here is that I should probably have had Raffin use the Brave Lance to break the enemy's shield here, rather than using the Armor Slayer immediately. That would not only have given me more opportunities to crit along the way and actually do some damage, it would also have meant that I could potentially have finished these guys off using the Armor Slayer's limited uses, rather than breaking it fruitlessly with no chance of killing, given that the stupid bishop is still around physicking them up. At this point, Sierra is going to be warping up towards the north to fight the artilleryman reinforcements that have been spawning. These guys do not have Chukonus, so she's safe to fight them, but what they do have is stone hoists. So if you let them get established, you'll have to face the remainder of the map with a bunch of catapult fire hailing down on you, and that is something that I desperately want to avoid. So let's quickly come back to these Mage Knights. Runan kills one, but he needs an Adept proc to do it, even with his rapier's effective damage. And Mintz is also unable to double naturally, so he's relying on Flurry to get the kill. And because of that, it's clear that these Mage Knights are still pretty threatening enemies, at least for our mid-tier combat units. So Raphael is now dismounting here, because he needs to go up the stairs on the next turn, and in this game, horses are not allowed to climb stairs. It's a little weird, but that's how it is. And the reason he needs to go up the stairs is obviously because he is going to be the boss killer for this map. And in fact, this boss is the reason why I've been investing so much into Raphael. Normally this boss is pretty darn scary, but with all the things we've given Raphael, he is going to make the boss look like a complete chump. The map is now pretty much under control, so I'm going to take this opportunity to talk about some game mechanics that I haven't had the chance to talk about and which aren't terribly significant overall, hence why I've waited so long to discuss them. And these are about the kill bonuses in this game. If you will recall from Chapter 1, the game keeps track of the number of kills on any given weapon, and it increases in critical once you exceed 50 kills. This system originates from Fire Emblem Genealogy of the Holy War, but in this game there is an extra wrinkle that was not present in that game, and that is what happens once you reach 100 kills on a single weapon. In this game, once you reach that threshold, the weapon gets a special star mark next to its icon, and there are two different colors that the star can be. You have a 50+ luck % chance to receive a blue star, which has no extra effect and is basically the same as getting 100 kills on a weapon in FE4. But that leaves a 50- luck % chance to get a red star instead. And a red star has the added effect of being similar to a devil weapon. That is to say, every time you attack, there is a 31- luck % chance that you will target yourself instead of hitting the enemy. Once again, Shadow Knights such as Zeeg are immune to this backfire effect. That makes red-starred weapons kind of risky to use, because there's a high chance of you criticaling yourself in the face. But if you'll remember back in Chapter 14, I talked about a house where you could pay money to gain +1 luck, and I mentioned that there was also an extra effect that they had, and that is related to this mechanic. Basically, if you go into one of those houses and choose to spend the money, any red star weapons in your inventory will be turned into blue star weapons, thus allowing you to safely use them again, with their gigantic bonus to crit. Of course, there are only a small handful of such houses in the entire game, and I believe that the last one in the whole game is in the next chapter. But the thing is, weapons are not the only thing in this game to receive kill bonuses. Units can receive kill bonuses as well, although it doesn't add to their crit. Basically, every time one of your units kills an enemy, they gain +1 in 3 categories. The class type of the enemy that you killed, the terrain type of the map you killed them on, and the weapon type that you used to kill them with. These kill counts go up to 250, and for every 10 kills you get in each of those categories, you gain +1 to hit and avoid in circumstances where those categories apply. For example, if you kill 10 monster units, you get +1 hit and avoid against every monster unit you fight after that. The effects of this are of course extremely minor, especially in an LTC run, but they have been building up, particularly for those of my units who only have one weapon available to them. So I felt it was worth mentioning. Staves work a little bit differently. Instead of kill bonuses for them, there's just one counter, and that is the number of times you have used a staff. And for these, every 10 uses of a staff gives you a 1% chance to activate a critical heal when using a heal or physics staff. And the effect of a critical heal is to fully restore the health of the targeted unit, instead of using the usual healing calculation of the staff. I'm actually kind of disappointed that I didn't see any of these during this run, because it would have been a fun thing to point out. But you can't have everything, I guess, and also the number of staff uses we get in this kind of run is low, so it would have been a very rare occurrence regardless. All of these counts are viewable on one of the screens of the unit menus for your units. And that brings me to another topic I'd like to talk about, which is the UI here. During this run, the only one of a unit's status screens that I've actually shown off is the standard stat and inventory screen, which is common to all Fire Emblem games. But this game actually has quite a few other screens that provide extra information. The second screen contains a list of all of the supports that a unit has, in addition to a spot that shows any units that they can talk to. And these are both fairly common features in modern Fire Emblem games, but this game came out before the Binding Blade, so we can safely say that Saga did it first. This screen also incidentally shows the required promotion item and the class that the unit will promote into, which is pretty important for a game like this, in which some classes promote into different units depending on the character. And the Fire Emblem series doesn't have anything remotely similar to this until Engage, the most recent one at this time. So that is well ahead of its time. The next screen after that is the aforementioned list of kill bonuses for the unit. And then the final screen, which is the only one of these screens that's also present for enemies, contains a complete list of movement penalties for terrain for that unit. And that is exceptionally nice, because this allows you, if you get into a sticky situation and have to retreat, to be absolutely certain about how far any given enemy can move, without having to check a guide online or memorize everything for yourself. This is less important in recent entries to the series, because those actually have global range toggles that update during your movement before you finalize your move. But this sort of feature would have been extremely helpful for something like Radiant Dawn's hard mode, where the enemy display feature is turned off, and it would have made that a whole lot less frustrating to deal with. Plus, I kind of like the fact that this data is present within the game, rather than having to be figured out by data miners for us to know it. Anyway, I think that is enough rambling about miscellaneous mechanics, because we are finally just about ready to make our move on the boss. So this boss is Ernst, whom we last saw back in Chapter 10 before he withdrew. And this time we have to actually fight him, and he is pretty much just as scary as he was back then. He is a gold paladin, and because of that he has the same class skills as Naron, that is Adept and Pavis. In addition to those, he has Soul and Nihil to better shore up his defenses. But that's not all, because his stats are utterly absurd. He is incredibly fast, doubling a lot of our units with his currently equipped weapon. And in case you were wanting to really low turn count this without caring about the recruitable unit by warping Sierra over, he starts with a Ward Blade equipped, and he also has a magic shield and a wind shield. So he is well defended against her most powerful tome. His vulnerability is that he has no way to negate critical hits, so you can rig a max magic Sierra to critical hit him with Thoron in order to one-hit KO him. But all in all, he is pretty scary, and that is why we have invested so much in Raphael to fight against him. Alright, so Runan has just talked to Stephanie, and that removes her from the map, and ensures that we get the reward that I was talking about earlier in a later map once we see her again. Now that she is off the field, we are free to use Aura Rain with impunity, but we can't do that until turn 10, so that's going to have to wait. Here I have Rishil move to attack Ernst, which he can safely do because he has 3 range, and Ernst's maximum range is 2. But I do not actually know why I attacked here, because this is going to have no practical effect. I guess it's a key demonstration of just how difficult it is to fight Ernst, because Rishel, even with his fairly accurate Sunflame Tome, has only 48 listed hit, and he's not doing all that much damage even though Ernst's resilience isn't the best. Anyway, we are now seeing my real strategy for dealing with Ernst. Raphael is going to wait in 2 range of him, and that's going to force Ernst to switch to a 2-range weapon, both of which are much heavier than his board blade, and that is going to allow Raphael to double him. This, in combination with Raphael having the Lunar Sword, allows us to bypass most of Ernst's scariness and double and 1-round KO him later on. Luna means that we don't care about Ernst's high defense or the silver shield that he is carrying, and we can bring to bear the full force of Raphael's empower boosted attack stat on him. Now, I did use the save staff here because Ernst has listed critical against Raphael, and with Adept, it's possible for Ernst to have 2 shots at activating that low percent crit. Fortunately, Raphael is able to survive an Adept because he's just that good, and the 2 range that Ernst has isn't particularly strong, but the risk of a crit means that I want to be able to reset to here rather than replaying the entire 25 minutes of gameplay it took for me to get this far. At the start of enemy phase, Ernst heals off all of the damage that Rishel managed to stick on him, thus demonstrating how pointless that attack was. And Ernst then shifts to his Javelin in order to attack Raphael. Since the Javelin is weighing him down, this also does reduce Ernst's Adept proc rate, so that is a little bit of extra reliability in there. Now, what I could have done here if I'd thought about it was have Raffin come over to trade the Goddess Shield to Raphael, and that would have given Raphael a perfect 100% survival rate against Ernst here. I didn't think of that, but fortunately it didn't end up being necessary. I did not have to reset at all due to Ernst critting me. And that leaves Raffin free to fight the enemy artillerymen without fear of their effective damage. Ernst does hit extremely hard though, so Raphael needs constant physics support in order to avoid a chance of death. Anyway, as I've mentioned, Ernst is one of the scariest bosses in the game, but we are about to make him look like a bit of a chump. Raphael is perfectly capable of 1-round KOing him with Luna, but unfortunately that's not what is about to happen, because Ernst annoyingly dodges the first attack I throw at him, and that leaves him with a little bit of HP left over. This isn't as big of a deal as it seems, because Ernst will attack into Raphael on the subsequent enemy phase anyway, and that will lead to his death even though he will have healed and probably won't get doubled. And because of the thing with terrain bonuses that I mentioned a while ago, he'll also be almost guaranteed to be hit despite the fact that he has slightly higher void from the attack speed he gains by switching to a lighter weapon. So all in all, this is a pretty reliable strategy, and it's made even more reliable by the fact that I managed to have Lyria activate a double Sing proc here, refreshing Raphael ready for another round of combat against Ernst on this player phase. The fact that it's a double Sing proc is actually kind of irrelevant, but it's still fun to see. Raffin and Mintz are doing a bit of combat before we go for Ernst, because we do need to keep a lid on the artillerymen that are continuing to spawn from the north end of the castle there. So by killing Ernst, Raphael is going to learn the Flurry skill. So he's going to join Mintz in the super overpowered skills club. And as we are about to see, it doesn't even matter if Ernst procs Pavis, because Raphael has more than enough attack to kill him straight through it. It is notable here that Pavis does actually reduce the damage dealt by the Lunar Sword, So perhaps it would be better to think of Pavis as applying a flat damage reduction to physical attacks, rather than being an increase to protection. After Ernst is dead, something interesting happens, and this trick is how we low turn count or speed through this map in a speedrun. So Runen automatically moves from wherever he is on the map over next to the seize point, without losing his action. And that means that if you manage to pull off, for example, the Thoron crit strategy with Sierra, Runen will walk directly over next to the seize point immediately on Ernst's death, and that will allow you to seize straight away. Because of this map is widely considered to be more of a defeat boss map than a seize map by people who play this game at a high level. And with that, the map is essentially over, with only a few enemies remaining. I currently have 3 of the reinforcement points unblocked. The Lance Rider fort near Mariel is pretty obvious. I am still using that as a grinding point for her. And I had a bit of a mishap over in the lower left, because I had to move Vega off that fort in order to try and deal with the artilleryman. And my units are now struggling to retake the fort to block it again. But the last reinforcement spawn point is the one up the north behind the fortress. I've had several opportunities where I could potentially have killed off the reinforcement artilleryman and blocked that point. And the reason why I haven't done that is that this is where our recruitable unit is going to be spawning from. And I was a little worried that I would accidentally spawn block him and be forced to reset. So that is why I am fighting my way through all of these artillerymen instead of blocking them from spawning. And that actually paid off, because by killing some of these, Raffin has reached level 24 and picked up the Adept skill. So that is a small increase to his offensive power. So at this point, the map is essentially over. The only real conflict left here is whether or not I am going to be able to successfully re-block the Axe Rider spawn point. Spoilers, I am going to be able to do that. I just need to switch Vega to his Brave Sword rather than trying to rely on a Shram crit. And so with that, I have killed the last conflict in this map for you, and there's nothing really left to say or do until our last recruitable unit finally shows up. So let's talk about him. His name is Hagar, and he is also an artilleryman, and we are going to have to recruit him with Mintz because they apparently used to serve in the same group or whatever. Hagar has 3 movement, so he is automatically bad, but it's really hard to understate how bad he is. At this point in the game, there are only 5 maps left for him to contribute in, and let me tell you, he is not going to be making any contributions with that movement, even though he does have a Stonehoist Ballista in his inventory. He joins too late to take up Tom's role in Holmes's side as well. So even though he comes with the Paragon skill for a quick leveling, he just is not good and isn't worth anything really. And the unfortunate thing is that he does cost us all of these turns to recruit. So we're finally at the end of this lengthy map as Runen seizes to complete Chapter 34 in 10 turns. And I am very glad that we have finally gotten through probably the longest map in the entire game. So hopefully next time we recruit a unit, it'll be a slightly better one with less time expended to get them. Alright, so that'll be it for this video, and I will see you next time.